Chat, if you guys could please write down your names in the minute, please.
Good morning.
Chat, if you guys could please. Good morning.
Oh, cool. Hey, just while people are writing down agenda items, I'll encourage everyone to pop open your webcam if you have them. It's always nice to see people.
Hey Aditya, can you just give me the editing access because I cannot write my name there.
You bet. Actually, walk us.
Yes. Hi Lee.
Hey.
I'm Waqas. I just recently joined this community. I see this is an intriguing community, so I'm very much hoping forward to work with you and contribute to the open source.
Totally. Yeah. Intriguing is the word of the day. Yeah, it's good of you to jump in. I dropped a link in the Zoom chat. It's a community member form. When you fill it in, it will facilitate your access to not only this doc, but a bunch of other resources. So fill that in if you would, and then you'll be off to the races.
Yeah, sure. After the meeting, I'll just fill it up.
Awesome. So I guess we had two newcomers and they have already introduced themselves. So we're 4 minutes over. I guess we can start with the agenda items. Ashish, you're up first. Ashish, would you like to take over?
Yeah, okay, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so assuming my screen is visible, I will, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll first give a little context on what I'm talking about. Then I'll talk about what problem currently I'm solving. And then I'll talk about two approaches, and I have written code for both of these approaches. I'll go over the pros and cons of both of these approaches, number of code lines changed in both these approaches, and then whichever approach gets the green flag, I'll add it. So first, a little context. So right now, this is one of the adapters, istio adapters. And in each of the adapters, we have what we call components. These version directories that you're seeing right now, these are components. So each components are nothing but a set of definitions and schemas that the adapter sends over to the Meshery server. I'll not go deep into why it does that and so on. I'll share a link later, or you can ask that question in discuss form about what these components are and why does each adapter sends that to Meshery server. So each adapter sends these components over to the Meshery server, and currently the way that we classify this component registration is in two ways: static component registration and dynamic component registration. Static basically means that we will have these bunch of definitions and schemas pre-built into the directory, and what we will do is when the adapter will start, it will just send these definitions and schemas over to the Meshery server. That is static component generation. Dynamic component generation is nothing but just one more addition to it. First of all, there are two things: components are getting generated and components are getting registered. These two things are pretty different. So right now what you're seeing here, these are the pre-generated components. So the generation part has already been done, and where this generation is happening, I'll go over that in a little while. So generation is done and we have these components, and for static component registration means that these pre-built components get registered to the Meshery server. Now dynamic component generation and registration means that every 24 hours we will check if there is a new version of that particular service mesh available. If there is, then we'll create the components and then we'll send it over to the Meshery server. So the creation and generation both happen in dynamic part, and in static part only the registration happens because these are already created over here. Now the problem, there are first of all a bunch of problem that we are sending these components to the Meshery server in two distinct ways. So in static component generation, we have these pre-built, and in dynamic, we are basically we are doing it inside of our Go program. So these already pre-built components that you're seeing, we are basically creating these in these workflows that we have, GitHub workflows, and all the logic is baked into these bash scripts, and which is kind of not nice, because if we need to change one thing about, let's say we want to add something to the schema, then we have to make the we have to change this particular script across all of the adapters, and then we have to change the meshkit function. So one more caveat is that the pre-built components use the binary, this QOpenAPI JSON schema binary, whereas the dynamic component generation that I talked about, that uses the meshkit function. So the problem here is obvious, that we have two different ways to do one particular thing. So we have n number of things to maintain. So the idea was to how to centralize it. So the first approach is to uh, okay, so the first approach is this. The first approach is to create this additional function, create components, and embed this function into the adapter library. The job of this function is simple. It takes a static configuration, and inside of the static configuration, you can configure URL and where to store your components after they are created. This is not responsible for registration. It only does one thing. It creates the component. That's it. So we create this additional logic to create the components, and then we embed that into the library. Each adapter uses can call functions from the library, and because this particular function is ubiquitous, it can be used by all of the adapters. So we embed this particular function inside of the adapter library, and we exploit the thing that Go tests allow us to run single Go files. So inside of our workflows, instead of running that entire logic, what we potentially do is that we just wrap our creation logic into the Go test. So every time a PR is merged, what we basically do is we go inside of that directory, and we run the test. When we will run the test, what will happen is that it will check if there is a new version available. If there is, then it will create these components, and then it will commit these. So we will have these things. For example, right now the latest one I have is 1.12.0, which is not the latest STU version. So if I run this, if I basically run Go test inside of that particular build directory, which will happen in the workflow if we go with this approach, uh, the test will be run. The components will be generated. This log is from the binary that actually generates the components. Actually, this log is from the meshkit function. And once the components are generated, you will see now there is a 1.12.1 also here. So yeah, the test passes, and we have all these new components generated. So the advantage of going with this approach is that, first of all, this gives us a lot of configurability. So we don't have all the logic embedded into bash scripts, which are infinitely hard to configure. All of the logic is embedded here. So if we want to, let's say today I don't want latest version, I want to generate component for some other version, all I need to do is just change this latest version to some different string, and it will just run the test again, and it will create these components for me. So it's straightforward. And I hope that the first approach is, I was able to explain what the first approach was. The advantage of this approach is that it is pretty easy to do. We just need to add this one function in the adapter library, and then in the workflows, instead of using these instead of basically uh, embedding all this bash script logic, we just call this Go test, and it will run one of the other advantages is, on each PR these tests will be run. So we will not commit the workloads, but on each PR we'll actually try this component generation. So if someone makes some changes to the, let's say, build package, and which can potentially fail something, we will be able to catch it. Second thing is that things would be centralized. So here, as you can see, so I've also added one other function, new config. So both the static and dynamic, they will use the same exact config. This function returns that central it takes a version, and it returns a configuration. So we can be 100% sure that both these things are using the exact same thing, and they will produce the exact same definitions and schemas, because we are reusing this configuration across dynamic as well as static component registration. So inside of main.go, the only thing that will change is that instead of basically instead of creating the config again, we'll reuse that configuration that we're using in the workflows, so inside of the tests. So that was the first approach. The problem is that the problem is obvious, because the problem is it solves the things, but it's again hacky. It's less hacky than bash scripts themselves, but it is hackier because we are still using go test for something that they are not made, because this is not a test. I'm just exploiting one capability of go test. So uh, this approach is very anti-pattern. So I have demoed this approach, I've talked about this approach. What's the secondary approach, which follows some kind of pattern, and which is good. One of the more problems with this approach is that what we are potentially doing is we are using the test of a Go module to change the structure of that Go module, which we will run. So it's like a test inside of that Go module is going to change the structure of that Go module, and I haven't seen it happening anywhere. And I think if any Go programmer will come tomorrow, and he might curse at me of what kind of pattern is this, although it works, but it doesn't mean that it's the best practice. Now the second approach. Okay, so this is exactly the clone of that repo, but with the second approach. The second approach is that instead of basically everything remains the same. This create components function remains the same. We still have a function, a separate function in library that has one job: creation of these components. So I think we started off on the wrong foot. We are talking about the static component generation and dynamic component generation, when we should be talking about what is component generation. Component generation can be divided into two steps. First is the creation of the components, and the second is the registration of the components, like I talked about.
Yes.
And I think both of these things should.
Yeah, sorry to good. Man, boy, I'm so hesitant to interrupt Ashish, because that is just the sort of fervor that gets something like this done, which and so the reason I interrupted is just because is to allow a beat for people to ask questions, because you've done a good job of presenting it from a couple of different perspectives, and I'm not sure that everybody still has a grip on exactly how cool this is, on how much this reduces work, how much it improves quality, some of the real timeliness of it as well. I guess maybe I'll toss in a first question there. So as these service meshes change, as the adapters have to go to update how it is that they're managing them, each of the meshes, so new components need to be generated and kept up to date, and they need to be stored, whether Meshery is managing the latest version of a service mesh, or the one back, or an older version, or an older version, or an older version. Though those components, they need to be generated and stored at least one, ideally or conceptually only once for each version of the service mesh. And so my question is, as Utkarsh had, you could hear it in his voice. He was tickled. He was running Meshery, probably working late, went to bed, woke up. There was a release of Istio that had happened the night, while he was sleeping, while he was being lazy, while he was sleeping. And so he gets back up, and it turns out like there was a release, and Meshery the components had been generated, and he was already managing the new version of Istio. And it's one of those things, like, it's by design. And it's why we talk ad nauseum about it, but it was such a pleasant surprise to him. And so my question to you is, as you refactor here, which to me is like a very obvious win, it's something that we talked about before we did two different implementations. My initial suggestion was what you're saying here. So I'm in vehement agreement with you. Will the 24 hours that you're referring to, that I think was with respect to workflows and how frequently a workflow would kick up, and is that also the same schedule? Is there also a schedule for actively running adapters?
Yeah, the 24-hour thing is, as you can see in the workflow, it will run as a cron job, and in an adapter, it's already set as, the ticker is set as for 24 hours. So yeah, that test will, basically that function, that thing will kick in every 24 hours. So we still would be doing it. Okay, so can I go over the second approach?
Yeah, sorry, I thought that you had, but yep. Sorry, so it's good that you do, because
Okay. So the second approach, does anyone else have any other questions?
Yeah, just that cron job there. Is that running in the adapter itself?
No, that's with this one.
Oh, this is in the workflows. Okay,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see.
This one.
Sorry, I saw something in main.go that looked like it was updating it, so I was a bit confused there.
Yeah, in main.go also there is a go routine that basically there's a for loop, and this is basically this function is run in every 24 hours. So there's a ticker here as well.
Okay.
So in every 24 hours, this function is executed, whose job is to check if there is a latest version for that particular service mesh, and if there is a latest version, then register its component so that Meshery can support it.
So you said if there's an update to Meshery, is that Meshery as a whole, or specifically this adapter? Or I know it happens for all of the adapters, but
This 24-hour thing, this basically this function executing in 24 hours. Yes, this happens in all of the adapters.
okay. And if there is an update, it will only update this adapter.
Of course, it will only update basically only update the components in this adapter. Every adapter has its own responsibility.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
but just to help, just to reinforce what Jared is asking, because is that Ashish, do you want to like just re-articulate the difference between what's going on when when there's an active Meshery deployment and it's been running for a month and there's 10 adapters and they've just been running versus when when a Meshery release is made and when a Meshery adapter release is made, what they're capable of at that point in time and what that Meshery deployment is capable.
So when the adapter release is made, you have these static components inbuilt in them. And because when the release was created, that workflow was run. And when the workflow was run, it had these latest components. And the other thing that Lee said about we have an already running adapter. I think these two things in terms of supporting any service mesh are indistinguishable, because we are doing the exact same thing in both of these things. So if you have a latest release of the adapter, well, very good, because you have these components inbuilt. Even if you don't, then also these components are going to be there anyways, because there is this sticker. So after every 24 hours, yeah, you can have stale, you'll have maybe Istio updated, Istio made a release and this was not synchronized with the sticker, of course. So basically at worst within 24 hours, you will have those capabilities. So there is not much difference between what a release can support and what a already running adapter can support. Does that answer your question?
Oh, that answers my questions if you're talking to me. So.
Okay.
Yeah, that was kind of unfair for Jared because he already got his question answered, but then I sort of asked on top. And yeah, there's one thing to Ashish, maybe after this to clarify. I'll ask it now just so I don't forget, but don't answer it now. And that is the scenario in which you've had a Meshery deployment running for a couple of months. A couple of you upgrade your Kubernetes cluster from one version to the next. You upgrade your service mesh from one version to the next. You do not redeploy, your Meshery version. You leave it the same. Let's discuss that later. Just if you would make a minute.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'll talk about the next approach. The next approach is almost the same with one difference. So we are still using this create component function, but the proposal is to basically pull this into a different Go module. And the reason for that is separation of concerns. So I believe that creation of components should be orthogonal to registration of components. And if we do that, then we have one more reusable binary. So instead of wrapping this create component inside of its own test, we can wrap it inside this main function, and with the help of a bunch of these flags, we can configure it externally. And what we're going to do is, inside of the workflow that I showed earlier, instead of running the go test, we go into this directory and we build it. So we have a binary for each adapter has its own binary and an auxiliary binary whose sole responsibility is creation of components, and this can be reused. So it can be used by something else other than the adapter itself. It's just a Go abstraction over those meshkit functions. So what's going to happen is there is not going to be different functions for static component registration or dynamic component registration, because when we talk about dynamic component registration, it's just doing it for the latest thing, right? So for the static component registration, nothing changes, all the code remains the same. For this, what we're calling dynamic component registration, what's going to happen is that every 24 hours, instead of what's going to happen is every 24 hours we'll basically call this binary, and if this binary updates anything, we will know that, because we have the logs. So if this binary updates anything, we will know that, and we'll basically register again, and we're going to reuse the same function, because there is no concept of building the components inside of the adapter. And I have taken it out of the adapter into a separate Go module, so that these two things can be orthogonal. So just to demo that, for example, in this case, I don't have the 1.12.0. I have 1.12.0, and the latest one is 1.12.1. So what's going to happen is that every 24 hours, this will kick in, and let's say we reach this part of the logic, and
Ashish, just for, and actually, sorry, Aditya, just as a time check, a demo is nice, although to wrap this up and move on with the rest of the agenda is, like, if we can avoid a binary, that would be ideal. This really should just be a meshkit function. That might still need to use an external binary as it does today, but not create another binary. Is there a reason to?
Yeah. The reason is that there is no other way that I could think of to because these things are really separate, and what we're doing is we are trying to tie them up together. And what's happening is that we have some separate logic in workflows and separate logic here, and when we try to tie them together, I thought about it for a while, and I couldn't figure out any other way than to isolate it into a different binary itself, because these two things are very different in their behavior. Static component registration, because in static component registration, it's not concerned with the creation of components themselves. So in one approach, we are creating it agnostic, and the adapter is agnostic of the way we are creating it. But in the other way, the adapter knows about the way we are creating it. And so these two things cannot be tied together, because they have one parameter which actually goes, which basically goes away from each other, that parameter that I'm talking about, the creation of the components. And so the only way to centralize everything is to take this creation and to take it outside and to throw it into a binary, and the adapter has no concern of creation. That is taken care by this auxiliary binary.
Yeah, I don't understand the difference between passing parameters to a binary versus passing parameters to a function.
Passing parameters, but how? The thing is that I think we should talk about it in a separate call. I think I'll be able to explain that.
Sounds good.
Maybe at the end of the call, if there's time to stay.
Sounds good. This is great. For my part, Jared, Mario, others, feedback?
I think the idea is a bit incomplete, so I'll refrain from making suggestions or comments. Because there's no time. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, needs more discussion. It's looking good.
Okay. Thanks, Ashish, it was a really good demo. Lee, would you like to talk about the next topic, tying off REST to GraphQL for Meshery UI, or should we skip over?
Just a quick highlight that Meshery has two APIs, REST API and a GraphQL API. For the most part, we strive for Meshery UI as a client to have as much up-to-date data as possible. And the way that it's, the architecture calls for GraphQL subscriptions. So the data that's being displayed should be almost entirely displayed through subscriptions. And so there's a mix of the Meshery UI that part of it uses REST and part of it uses GraphQL. And so just a call to all of you, there's work to do here. There's work to do in terms of converting from REST to GraphQL. There's a lot of prior art to look at if you want to pick up, if you want to write one of these. So it's about writing a GraphQL resolver, more or less. So it's like column H or I or so, some of the columns that are in red that will call out, where subscriptions are still needed. So I think Barak, you're writing one now. Is that right? Anything you want to call out about it? Barak, are you there? So he's doing a subscription on patterns. Nope, maybe Barak isn't there. Okay. So if anyone is interested, just signal.
Okay, Lee, you have the next topic as well. Integration tests.
Yeah. Hey. So we've been collectively working to improve the quality of Meshery as a project, and to do that, we need lots of automation. There have been some integration, various types of tests being automated. A lot of that happening in GitHub workflows. What we've done recently is taking the output of those workflows, of those tests, and push that output to Meshery docs so that we can display it here. So that means that there's a lot of test results. As a reader of this set of test results, you're interested, you can generally be interested in a lot of these details, but this needs to be summarized. And so there's just a call to action here for anyone who is familiar with Jekyll and wants to, it's not really a database query, it's just this matrix, this report needs to be enhanced so that test results are grouped by component. So just another call for volunteer people, someone who might want to flex their skills in Jekyll.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Mario, would you like to talk about the Cypress C2E test?
Hello. Yes, sorry, I was in mute. Thank you. There was this message I answered like a comment. But maybe I should just talk about the progress. So I created this template some time ago. That's there. If you go to the files changed, there's several files that wouldn't make sense to go through except for the actual test itself. So there's some, let's just keep going until we get to the Cypress E2E folder. I usually just collapse all of them. But yeah, here we see this is the test. Is it possible? Yeah, that was the test. That's the test. Could you just scroll and I'm sorry, could you make the green side bigger?
I don't
It's
think
possible?
I can do it.
I think it's not. Yeah, you will need to change the view, but it's okay. Yeah, because we'll take more time scrolling again. Basically, we can see over here so we have this object, or let's say an array with objects, one for each, let's say test. And here, right now, this is for the deployment. So the test data is the first, let's say, 20 something lines. Then there's a test template where that data is entered. Like, so this function will receive that array, and so for each object in the array, there'll be a test for each of those. So right now it's one object for each component. So we have filters, applications, and patterns. So the pattern is pretty similar. So right now this test, we could say it's working, but there was an issue open for the pattern. It got fixed. Then there was another issue. I think it should be fixed, but I added some comments. So I need to talk with Abhishek to see like if those comments are valid or not. Still, I'm after the call, I'll merge those changes and try to run the test again so that I can complete the scripting because since the test is running into failure before some other steps, there still needs to be actually. If you look at line, let me see. Could you scroll down a bit?
Yeah, this is the
down.
end of the.
Oh, that's the end. Sorry. And there you see it says there expected upload config item. So we need to go to the template. That's like configuration test template. That's about line 30 something ish. Yep, 33. Yeah. So when we're trying to send the upload, so that's the post in line 43. So it's having some failures. So right now I'm not able to let's say so that's the before each. If we go to line 52 and below, so there's still some problems with so this is the actual upload. Sorry, yeah. So the upload is in line. What is that? Expect body to have. Yeah. So the request itself is the one that is being returned, like in this line 61. So there's some errors here, and well, yeah, basically I'm not able to finish the script because these steps aren't being touched, the ones after the upload. So that's like kind of like a blocker. I'll try to get that solved. And there were like 5 observations that I wasn't really sure if they were issues as well. They might have been side effects of something else like that was already open as an issue. But yeah, I think that's it. Not sure if there's any questions or comments. This test the three components, so it's just a matter of passing the right object. As I script, I did find like a slight difference in some expected conditions. So I had to pass like a function to the array object so that it could be invoked, and like that differed like at least in one of the. Actually, could you go up like in that object? Like in the beginning. If you go to the beginning, you see there's some filters and applications expect line 12 and 20. So that's basically the difference that seems that filters and apps was having like a specific structure for the body. I think that should be fixed like with the latest change, but I still need to rerun this again. So that's the status. Not sure if there's any comments or questions. Now we can proceed with other items. The agenda.
Mario, I guess like give this some thought if you would. If there's one test out of however many we're doing here that works for one type of content.
Oh, okay.
Then that's a valid. We can like comment out the rest or whatever. Like it's like we can start benefiting from your efforts.
Right.
Yeah. Say it again.
Okay, you're right. So you're saying that if part of this works, we could integrate that and then just work on the pending stuff like after, right?
Yeah. And
Like
maybe you,
like comment parts of this and then just merge it and handle that work in a separate scope, right? Separate item, PR. That makes sense. I could, let's say the filter works. I could just comment the other lines, line 14 through like whatever of these other two objects that's creating tests that's not working. The only problem if we go to, can you go to the PR description? Yeah, that's a very
yeah,
good point. Yeah.
we could just,
There's really, sorry, go ahead.
we can either not close this one, or we can open up another one that is a continuation or a, but anyway, we don't, anyway, my urging here is just encouragement to see your work and your efforts fruited.
Benefit the project. Of course, the only concern, even though I would comment like part that's not working, have like a partial test, that's fine. You know, it could like improve. The concern is the last checkbox. So, okay, this is deploying a filter, but there's still nothing in place to test the infrastructure. Like, is that like maybe there were no 500s? Okay, the GUI, the UI is showing that new item. The deployment is not returning errors. But then again, like there's still nothing in place to check the infrastructure or the filter, or is that something this test should be concerned as it is end to end, or are we sure that there's already some Meshery CTL test in place? Not CTL, sorry, Meshery server tests in place that go end to end as to actually deploy a filter and through the same mechanism, or not?
Yeah.
And if not, yeah, go ahead.
It'll be probably test by test, or like potentially area by area, because some areas it would be like, hey, if the initial request came back with the 200, like you're good, like we're totally good. In other cases, to your point, it might be like, yeah, the initial request came back with the 200, but it may not work at all. Like yeah, it'll be case by case. Some of the cases will, to your point, already be covered.
About a filter, for example, that's the one that I think I saw less issues. Like I didn't saw any errors, didn't fail out.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yep. Some of the changes will be like, oh, there was a traffic split applied as a configuration to a mesh. Are we sure that the traffic, like half of it is going that way, half of it is going this way? Like, yep, it'll be.
And actually, the samples used, sorry to interrupt, the samples used, they rely on this upstream server. So it needs to be compiled, et cetera, et cetera. Honestly, I'm not certain that the CI environment where this test runs on, if that's already in place, if we will need to script that. And I just see it's not failing, but if we want to check like the actual workload, that filter, I mean, first, number one, I'm not sure that's in place in that environment, like during that execution. And number two, there's nothing in place from after running that cypress test to look at that specific filter. So if the answer is sometimes we will need to take a look after running the end-to-end test through the UI, then I would need to allocate like either additional item, like maybe move that out of scope to some other test, some other issue, whatever. Idea is that I need to look a way to solve that problem by, there's some ways to have Cypress invoke either a plugin or something we define, and then that could run something directly in Node.js environment locally. And that could be a way to run kubectl or something to something else that would like check the actual deployment.
Yeah, a lot of it should be handled by Meshery itself. Like over time, Meshery needs to assert, orchestrate, and then validate. the
Okay, so
operation.
what if we wait? Okay, I get you. So what if we then that we could take this out of scope for now, and then once there's like that self assertion is in place, yeah, that we would be able to have more tools to reuse, and then like not reinvent the wheel in this context, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so should I remove that last checkbox, which is check actual expected infrastructure is present? Like not only present, but also that functional after the deployment, for example.
You shouldn't let it hold up merging some of the tests that are working, that the tests will be iterated on, or, the rest of the folks will keep iterating, but hold, like, put a pin in that last checkbox, because it's like, it won't always be the same answer. Ideally, most of the time, the answer is, well, Meshery as a system guarantees that.
You're right. Yeah, we cannot like just do a pass all and let's not worry about that. You're right. It's like on a case by case, depending on what's being deployed, right? And so on.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. All right, let's move on then. Pranav, would you like to talk about your PR?
Yeah, next, like for this PR, I worked on consolidating two workflows, service mesh install and service mesh add-on for the Istio adapter. Basically, this workflow, like it tests our Istio adapter and like then puts on the final result onto the compatibility matrix, which Lee was just talking about. So in this PR, I just like consolidated the two workflows. Initially, it was in two different files, so I added them in the single one because like basically the work was the same, that is to test the issue adapter then put on the result on our Meshery docs. So like that's all about this PR, and it also got merged last week. So yeah, that's all.
Okay, great. Anyone, any comments about this? I guess not. Okay. Lee, would you like to say that?
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. None of the logic necessarily changed. It's just,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, nice. Yeah. That's great.
Thanks, Pranav. Aditya, would you like to talk about your issue with the performance profiles?
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Sure.
Is it visible?
Yep.
Yeah, so I've been working on the search issue for the performance profile. So this is the current behavior. Like if we search any profile which are not present here, like let's press Z, then yeah, so we get this. So there's no way to go back. All the profiles are lost, right? We have to refresh the page. So we have to refresh the page to get all the profiles. So yeah, I wanted to fix this. So the fix that I have that I made was that so suppose if we search a query which does not match any profile, like Z again, so this will do nothing, right? And another problem with the current version was like if we suppose search something and we get this something, but if we close it, we don't go to the we don't get the other lab which were present there. So we can see here we don't get that. So that also I fixed, because suppose I search something and if I close this, then we'll get the other labs too. So yeah, that's it. So we were suggesting that when we don't match any profiles, then I think we should do something else. Like if you have any suggestions, like Lee said that we can show the no adapter found in this table only. That would be good, I guess, but I could not figure out how to do that. If anyone has any suggestions.
Cool. Sorry, the question was how to display an empty row with text in it.
Yeah, empty rows. Because as of now, as you can see, like we just go blank to the nothing else and add performance profile page comes up. So
Okay, wait, and I missed it. Can you type in a search term that doesn't match anything?
like in the edited one or in the current version?
The current version, if you would.
All right, I'll just.
The current edited version. Just kidding.
Yeah, so yeah, we get this. If
Okay.
I try to search something, but when we clear it out, we don't get anything. Like it's just something.
Okay. Okay. Now, can you search for something that isn't there?
All right, let me refresh the page. Yeah, we just go back to this page.
This
No option
is
to
this
go back.
is in the stable version of Meshery.
Yeah, this is
Right.
a stable version of Meshery.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And then you're going to change it to where there's just like if you type in ZZZZZ.
Happens from my version, but I guess that's not suitable.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, we just want an empty record set, just an empty table. You know, like same columns, same everything else. Just like it's
Just
a
a-
bonus if you can display a message in the table that says, you know, no records matching ZZZZZ. Great.
Is it
If you
like
can't-
is that just this issue, or you was asking that it is not rendering off? When we are searching off, it's not getting back to the original state.
Yeah, that is also the issue in the current version. I kind of fixed
So
that.
you are
That's
suggesting
working well.
something like we are typing and it's searching. It's like it's a continuously searching and typing thing.
Yeah. So what I was suggesting was that if we type something that doesn't match, I guess we can display an empty table state or a message that says no adapter found with that name.
That's fun thing. The other thing is like you want it to be dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be done. Yes, Gaurav speaking something.
That using we have the same functionality enabled in our patterns configuration. If you go to configuration patterns or anyone
Configuration.
patterns, yeah, and if you try to search any of the file, like if you are not able to see any patterns, right?
No, I have not created any pattern.
Okay, yeah, just you can try it. Save this pattern. Yeah, the left button.
This one, right?
Left one. Yep, just left to this. Yep, this one. Yeah, and if you search anything like Z anything or yep.
Oh yeah. That's the exact thing. Yeah.
The same functionality we have in configurations. Yep.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So I think I can replicate this in the performance
You
profile.
just need to.
And if you erase it, if you should get back.
Yeah, it is getting back.
We could copy the same
that's-
model if you.
Yeah. Because we
totally.
the same MUI data table across the performance and configurations.
Okay, yeah, space one. Yeah, this had some issues with the space also. Like if you type space, like nothing, the same page would come that says that nothing is matching. So yeah, okay, this fixes that also. Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. So we're talking about the search, right?
Yeah. Search of the profile, performance profiles.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. And we were comparing with the patterns. And if you could show the patterns just for a second. And to be honest, for the test I'm writing, I'm focusing a lot on the local file upload, and that's it. But if you go to patterns, I think it's loading. It's loading, right?
Yeah. That's
Uh-huh.
local. So
So
yeah.
so what's the button that that will be moved to the top, like that one. The deploy,
I
not
didn't
the
get
like
the
the
question.
The
yeah,
create
just write a
pattern one.
comment in the chat, like to create a new pattern, like that one in the
Yep.
bottom, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, create pattern and this thing.
create
The
pattern.
save
Oh,
pattern as
that's
new
right.
file.
Got
Yeah,
it.
we should move that button to the top. It like if you
Mhm.
have 10, 15 patterns, you'll miss that button for sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it'll get to the bottom and they wouldn't see it as fast. Is the payload for this screen expected to be the same as when a user uploads, let's say, a local file? Like, is there any big difference in the payload?
No,
If
other
it's
the
more than
payload
a yes or no
will,
answer, like then maybe
yeah,
let's skip it.
payload will remain same as the local upload.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. That's all.
And just for the user experience, what we can have, Aditya, if you can navigate to patterns again. Yep. Yep. Thanks.
It doesn't go back. Wait, I have to delete. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
is that a bug or maybe an improvement area?
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, for the user experience, what we can have for create pattern button when we are moving it upward. So we can just have one plus or addition import icon at in the place of the local upload and the URL, and we can have a modal or a drop down, whichever is much more suitable. And then we can have some sort of options like you want to upload your file locally or URL, or you want to create your own pattern. So rather than having three different buttons, one particular button with all this sort of approach will be much better, I guess.
Like more options
Plus
and then
modal
get a
drop
model?
down.
Yeah, a modal
Or-
or a drop down would work, I guess.
And that should need to be consistent across these 3 pages, right?
Yep.
Is there a need for that change? Like, what's the benefit of doing that change?
A better
If we have
user
more patterns,
experience.
we can miss it.
Okay,
Like
I
if
have
we got
something
more
to say
patterns,
about.
this will be hidden. So top. Yeah,
Okay, I
Piyush.
have something to like share. If you like click on plus in Slack, it creates a like it's only a plus. Then when we click on the plus, it opens up a model. I think we could implement similar kind of thing that there. There can be an option for URL upload, for file upload, and like directly creating a pattern. Just a plus in actual UI. You will click on it. It will work like the Slack, like look like the Slack thing. I mean.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. Just that, like, reason being look like Slack. It's not that convincing to me, but I think guess it's matter of preference. Like if the answer if the answer is, oh, it's more usable, but actually it's more clicks. So UX, I'm not a UX expert, but it's usual that less clicks is better, unless there is a reason for having that kind of experience, like a valid reason, like really either functional or it's, I don't know, maybe
Yes,
there's
Mario,
a problem.
you're right that less clicks are better as for the user experience, but we also want to save space and just look everything more component, more clean and all. So I guess that would be much better.
Okay, yeah, I don't see it cluttered, but
yeah, it's
again, it's maybe it's a matter of you see it cluttered like in the current version.
No, because we will be having some sort of more import options for the tables, and that
okay,
list will
maybe the import, maybe we could do that for the import and then like click import and we could see more options, like,
yep,
but not for all of the options we
not
have,
for
right?
all of the options.
Or that,
for the
okay,
import.
yeah. Clear, and now it's better. Like, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, we can move this conversation to Slack because there are a lot of ideas, right? So
Sure.
moving on, we have Piyush's topic. Piyush, would you like to talk about your recent PR?
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Yep, sure.
Okay, it should share my screen. Is it visual? I'm assuming it is.
Yep.
Okay, so there is a new PR for like Meshery CTL. It is in the regards of Meshery config. Let's talk about the issue first. So the issue is to introduce the support of Meshery perf, like introduce the support to add Meshery perf in mesh config. Like Meshery perf will be a new component, and it's a different kind of component which will be like coming into the Meshery ecosystem. So there were three proposals. First was that to add on, like introduce it as an add-on, and the second was like literally type each load generator with the like user preference, and the third one was replace adapters with components that are like the part of Meshery ecosystem, and people can actually write them and deploy them manually, like mentioning them as a default that I want to deploy it. Okay, so the proposal 3 was accepted, and this PR was open. So Navendu is not here right now, so I need people to review this PR and actually test it in their local system. Okay, I have done my system, but I want other people to test it in their system so that we can make sure that this thing is working and it is robust to add it into the next release. So that was the other thing I wanted to ask. So are there any questions regarding this?
Yeah, Piyush, just a quick confirmation, because I think from your last commit, I wasn't quite sure.
Okay, yeah, I remember. Okay, let's say I'll explain. Okay, there is a really big confusion and like a kind of discussion that is, what if like we are like changing components, the term adapters with the components in mesh config. What about other places like documentation or like all over the thing, like the whole system? We are not changing the term adapter with components there because these few deployments are actually adapters. They are not components. Like they are components, but they are actually adapters. But Meshery perf is not an adapter, right? So like Lee just asked me that in system check we have a like a flag that is dash dash adapter to check if we are connected to adapters or not. So Lee asked if Meshery perf will be like health check with this adapter, like with this flag or not. So my answer to that is that it will be not, because it is not adapter. And the second thing, we cannot health check it as adapter because Meshery server isn't going to recognize this deployment as an adapter. So we can't change like adapter, replace the adapters with components in the system. Adapters will be a big term, it will stay, and the components will be a kind of a superset of the term adapter.
Sounds great.
What
That answers my question.
What components are these? Sorry, like Meshery perf, and then what? So user is able to deploy them separately, like, or what's the?
Okay, these components are like Meshery, like ISTO adapter, the Nginx adapter, these adapters, and Meshery perf. Now, Meshery perf will be a new component in this system. So we had an issue about how we are going to handle it. Like, will there be more add-ons? We could have added it as an add-on in mesh config and introduced it as an add-on in Meshery ecosystem, but we decided to replace the term adapters and introduce a new term component as a superset of adapter term. I'm really bad at explaining.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Use the health check for Meshery perf as a component. Would that just be another line added to that check.go?
Yeah, it will be like just a new function which will help check the status of Meshery perf.
Makes sense. And hopefully the check will be pretty similar because, or hopefully you'll find that you're able to write it very similarly, just because Meshery perf as a component should have should be using meshkit and should have some of the same responses that a Meshery adapter would have or that Meshery operator would have. And so they become kind of consistent in that way. And nice.
Oh yeah, then it would be not that big of a deal. It would be really simple thing to do.
It's great. Yeah, it's a good.
In order to test this, how would we test this?
Yeah,
so
nice. Okay, so nice. Nice question. So what I would suggest is you guys must have should have a CLI that is called GH. It's a GitHub CLI. Okay, so you check out this PR in your local. You build up Meshery CTL by running the command make. Okay, in Meshery CTL folder. Then you try to run any of the commands. It should fail because you will have a mesh config which is prior to this, which isn't supported by this this PR, because that one is old. It has the adapter term. Then you will delete your mesh config and run Meshery CTL system start. It will create a whole new mesh config in your system. You have to manually check it if it is correct or not. It is the exact thing that should be there, and that will be a thumbs up that yeah, this is working fine.
Can we add these steps to the description?
Yeah, I'll add a new comment explaining what you what should be the conditions to have a green thumbs up.
Yeah, I think there's like a section in the PR, right, for acceptance test, or maybe that's not an issue. But if it's in the PR, it would be more easy to find.
Okay,
I'll
add
comment,
Yeah, I'll add at the top. I'll write it all the steps and all the green checks that should be work in your system to make sure that this PR won't break anything other than not accepting the pre-existing the old mesh config in people's system.
Awesome, thank you. Great work.
Okay.
Thanks, Piyush. That was a good. That was a good demo. Okay, so we're over time, but I have a very small topic. So I've been working on the service mesh catalog for some time. So recently I added Wasm filters to it. So as you can see, this design is not very intuitive because we have it doesn't look nice basically. So if someone's interested in trying their hand at Figma and coming up with a design that we could use for the Wasm filters, please feel free to do so. Yeah, that's all I had from my side. Yep.
Sorry, what makes this not intuitive?
It doesn't look nice. That's what I mean by not intuitive.
Okay.
You see,
it's
all
not
of them
aesthetic.
look the same. Yeah, it's not aesthetic.
Cool.
Yeah, that's why here, since we don't have patterns for individual types of patterns, that's why we've kept them as coming soon, so that it it looks aesthetic basically. Yeah. So yep.
So this is not pretty.
Yeah, it's not pretty. It's a whole lot of purple.
Yeah, which one? Which aspect is it that is troubling
you? Everything's purple, right?
Yeah.
So this is more with the coloring scheme?
Not exactly with the coloring scheme, but I don't know what to put here, right? Except for the WebAssembly icon, because We don't
this
have
looks
anything
good.
else to represent.
Should we open
Okay, so
an
I
issue?
guess that was
Like
yeah, we can open an issue
and
for
then like
UX.
at the good first issue, high UX, and
Mhm.
that might attract a bigger audience than the ones that are here.
Yeah. So is it just me, or do others also find this a little non-aesthetic?
Well, yeah, repeating the same icon everywhere with different sizes, it does look kind of like
Yeah.
not ugly, but it's not that pretty.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay, I have a suggestion, Aditya, about the icons you are doing here. You can make it look like a 3D one, or give it some shadow. It could look a bit nice. Just a suggestion from my side.
We could add a shadow, but then again, we would have to, it would be the same icon with shadows for 7 of the filters that we have right now.
You're kind of recycling the same icon everywhere. That's the difference. And if you show the other screen, there were like what were they, patterns or apps? Yeah, you would see like different, like the icons. Maybe the small icon for the ID is the same, but there's different icons for those deployments, and you see they're actually different like images being used as like the central icon for each card. So I think that's the main concern. Like you repeating the purple Wasm icon.
Yeah.
On the other screen. Yeah, this one. I think it's because they're all Wasm filters, but they're not the same Wasm filter. So they could be nice to have like a separate way of, visually differentiating them through that central icon, or I don't know how we would call that, but yeah, that WA purple big icon.
Yep.
And just a quick check, Aditya, are we using the same common component that we were using for pattern catalogs? I mean, like,
Yep. It's being reused.
Yep.
It's being
Okay. That's great.
Any other comments? Going once? Okay. I guess not. So, we've come to the end of the agenda. So we can wrap it up. Thank you all for joining. I'll see you guys next week, or I'll see you guys on the community call on Friday. Thanks. Thank you all for joining. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks. See you all. Thanks, Aditya.